Good evening, everyone. We are here and we have a special guest. It is the Black Comic Lords. I want to shout out the Black Comic Lords fam, the Black Superheroes Forever fam, and all our affiliates and all of our haters. We are back here one more again. And we have a special guest with us on tonight. This distinguished gentleman is a titan when it comes to comic books, representation, and things of that nature. And it is our honor to have him with us tonight. Professor John Jennings is an author, he's a graphic novelist, a curator, a Harvard Fellow, New York's best time seller, 2018 Eisner winner, and all-around champion of Black culture. That's what I'm talking about. And as professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California, Riverside, Professor Jennings examines visual culture of race in various media forms, including film, illustrated fiction, and comics and graphic novels. He's also director of Abrams Comics Art imprint Megascope, which publishes graphic novels focused on the experiences of people of color. His research interests include the visual culture of hip-hop, Afrofuturism, and politics, visual literacy, horror, and ethnogothic and speculative design, and its applications to visual rhetoric. Professor Jennings is co-editor of the 2016 Eisner Award-winning collection, Black of the Ink, Constructions of Black Identity in Comics and Sequential Art, and co-founder and organizer of the Schomburg Center of Black Comic Book Festival in Harlem. He's also co-founder and organizer of the MLK NorCal's Black Comic Arts Festival in San Francisco, and also SoulCom, the Brown and Black Comic Expo at The Ohio State University. That is an extensive list, and I'm just going to get one more accolade to that. And my brother, my elder, I just want to thank you, Professor John Jennings. Thank you for being with us, sir. How are you this evening?
Oh man, thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful to be here, and it's always it's wild to hear all that stuff. I mean, obviously, I love science fiction and fantasy about our folk. So, it's does my heart good to be here. And I'm really thankful for what you all have been doing, with your Facebook page and all the work you've been doing, like promoting Black comics and representation. So thank you for having me, actually. So
you're most welcome. So let's get right on into it. So I want to ask you, just first off, how did you get into comics?
It was my mother's fault. So I grew up, I was born in 1970 in, Mississippi. And I grew up financially challenged in the middle of the woods, essentially. I grew up in Florida, Mississippi, about 15 miles north of Jackson, which is the capital. Right. My mom was a English major at Alcorn State University, which is a historically Black college in Norman, Mississippi. And she got pregnant with me and then moved back with her folks. And so, she was a single mom, trying to figure out how to, raise a little boy in, post-civil rights era Mississippi. So she had always been like a big fan of like science fiction and fantasy herself, or horror. She started watching stuff like, super early, like, the Wolfman and, the Lon Chaney films and things of that nature. So she was always a big fan of that stuff. And, when I grew up, man, I was a really big fan of like, mythology. So I started reading super early, and trying to draw super early as well. This is before, of course, like all the connectedness and MTV and, video games, whatever else is going on, and TikToking and all this kind of stuff. So, it was just, it was just your brain and your thoughts. And I lived, like I said, I lived off in the country. So I was like really into science and astronomy and stuff like that. I literally was a stargazer. Like I would I literally like get on top of a barn, and I know it sounds crazy, but and then stare at the stars and wonder what was out there, And
Right.
so mythology really fascinated me. Once I realized that all the constellations had names and had stories connected to them, I was hooked. And so my mom, she brought me like comics super early. I want to say she got me like Mighty Thor and stuff like Superman, Wonder Woman, everything. And before you know it, I was hooked on anything that looked like a graphic novel, anything that looked like a illustrated book, anything that looked like a superhero.
Right.
So that's kind of where it was. So it came from my mom, and she also had a really open mind about the stuff I was checking out. So she was a big fan of like Stephen King and a lot of
Oh, okay.
murder mysteries like Agatha Christie and stuff like that. So I was, I just fell in love with that stuff too. So I'm still a big detective fiction, reader these days too. And it was because of that, and then it just kind of blossomed from there. Honestly.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let me ask you. You talked about comics. What comics did you gravitate to? I mean, what were your favorites? Some of your favorites as a kid growing up.
I think I started with like the run of the mill stuff. I was really into the superhero stuff at first, like Superman, Batman. I remember this is before, of course, before the direct market where you could actually access comics pretty readily. So what we would do when we would drive into town, like I said, we lived out in the sticks. We would go into town with my grandparents or my mom, and I would make my comic book run. So you would have like the second run comics that were torn, with the covers torn off and they were in a repackaged, and we had like a little store that was kind of like a little Woolworths kind of thing. It's family owned little, dime store or whatever, right? So I would start there, and then I would go over to the Stop and Go, and see what they got in the spin racks, right? And then there was a gas station across the street. So I was like, I had these 3 nodes where I could get comics. So I was into, DC at first, and then I want to say the thing that actually attracted me to Marvel was like The Thing. The first time I saw someone like a Spider-Man comic, and I was like, "Who is this green? This?" Because I knew who the Hulk was. Like, who is this orange guy? It's like he's like an orange Hulk. I don't understand. I remember like figuring that out. And then the Vision. Actually, I just loved the design of the Vision. I just thought he was just a really well-designed character, and so I started reading Avengers because of the Vision. But I think that when I got 11 or 12, I really fell in love with Daredevil, like the run on Frank Miller's Daredevil. I want to say the episode, it might be like 186. You guys probably know better than I do, but maybe it was 164. I don't know. But it was during the Frank Miller run where he quote unquote fights the Hulk, right? Where the Hulk is called Blind Alley, and you probably remember the cover, like him standing in the alleyway, and he's beat down, and the Hulk, and you can see like the arm of the Hulk, and he's like it's kind of a very striking cover, And
Frank Miller's Daredevil is legendary for sure.
It's legendary. And so that was probably like what made me, and I'm still like, Daredevil was still my favorite character because of that. I think it's just the way that he wrote the character, just really, it was really intriguing. And he wrote it like a detective fiction story, and I think those are the things that really attracted me to that character. Now, the other thing I was reading was horror comics, right? Okay. So I kind of missed the boat on the early EC stuff I didn't know about, but the stuff that was inspired by EC Comics horror stuff, like the Warren magazines, the black and white magazines, I was really into that stuff. My mom didn't realize how messed up those books were. She was like, oh, it's comics, so all right, well, it could be that. It was terrifying, messed up stuff, and like Vampirella is like racy, and then heavy metal, like, so if I show it to her, like, yo, can I get this? And she's like, yeah, cool. And I'm like, okay. Not knowing there was scantily clad elves and torture scenes and eyeballs popping out their faces and all kinds of stuff. But the other thing, of course, were the DC Comics horror comics, right? I mean, I like the Marvel stuff enough, but I think for me, I really like stuff like Tales from the Unexpected and House of Secrets and House of Mystery and all the characters like Johnny Peril and Dr. 13 and stuff like that. And this course was mirroring some of the stuff I was watching. Like I was a really big Kolchak the Night Stalker fan, right? So that kind of stuff that looked like Kolchak, I was trying to watch, and read. And and so those were the things I was checking out, I think. And
you and Rodney Barnes have that in common.
Yeah, man. We've had many a conversation about it actually. So You see, he spoke in my class fairly recently, and we were talking about Kolchak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Now, you got a lot on your resume, so let me just ask you, what comics do you think, if any, influenced your career path in terms of your view of comics, I should say?
That is really an interesting question, because honestly, I think probably one of the more influential comics because this is what happened. So I always wanted to be an artist. I didn't really have a lot of artists around me that were practicing artists. Like I said, my Uncle Willie, God rest him, was very talented. He would draw comics and stuff for me. But then, he let it go. And sometimes, if you don't use that talent, you lose it, because by that, he used to be able to draw anything, and through lack of practice, it left him, but it inspired me to keep going. Right. And so I kind of gave up on comics a little bit. Like, I have to say, like, after I went to the military for a little bit, I was in an accident. And while I was there, I actually was able to get a scholarship at Jackson State. And I went to the military because my mom was like, well, I'd rather you retire from the military or be a doctor or something like that. And all I heard was retire from the military. So I went to the Army, right? And when I left there, I ended up going to Jackson State University, on an academic scholarship, and I ended up majoring in commercial art, which is the great granddaddy of graphic design, and I got a minor in drawing. But I worked on the school newspaper, right? So I was that dude. So I was like the cartoonist and stuff for the Blue and White Flash, which segued into a position that started off as an internship with the Clarion Ledger, which is Jackson's biggest paper. And so I was working right out of school in newspapers and stuff, right? And all the time I was drawing comics. I was always drawing comics, but I just had kind of like, because of losing touch with them, like after the direct market, of course, they all move into the they move into these specialty shops, right? These comic shops. And so I didn't have access to those. So I kind of gave up on them. And so what happens is I get into grad school and I'm still obsessed with comics, but I'm trying to get my degree, my Master of Fine Arts in Graphic Design, which is a terminal degree in art. And my professors were just up on, they saw that I was still into comics. And so this is around 1994, 95, something like that. So this is around the time that Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics came out. And so that particular comic, because it's a comic about comics, it changed my life because it actually like really opened up the possibilities to what comics could be, And so it gave you a breadth. And so from Scott McCloud's comic book analysis, I started to see more of the possibilities. And so then, of course, I started falling in love with Milestone Media and, the Vertigo line and stuff like that. Because, the 90s were a very interesting time in comics because of the speculative market and stuff like that, right? So so I said that the comic book that really that changed the way I looked at my career was probably Understanding Comics. Yeah. Yep. Okay. I think it was. Yeah, because it was because I was studying comic. Well, I was studying design, and so that book is really not just about comics. It's a media study. It's about media, And so once I started changing the way I looked at comics, it opened up a new path for me,
Okay. Now you mentioned just now of being a cartoonist, and I was curious. When I look at some of your art, I see that. That cartoonist is like, you could like write a few panels and, what I'm saying, like we normally would get in the newspaper. I just kind of picked that up. So I was just curious. I mean, have you always adapted that kind of style, or is that just kind of how you do it, or do you change up from project to project, if that makes any sense?
No, it does. I do change it from, because I think like a designer, so like if I'm applying a particular style to a thing, it's really like a problem-solving mechanism for me. Like because even storytelling to me is a problem-solving like technology. Like how do we get at something? Well, we make a story about it. That's why I think attracted me to mythology, because myths are like mechanisms for us to understand the world through. So so for me, like, okay, so when I was in, I want to say it was a sophomore, it was my sophomore year in college, and I was in Detroit. I was actually staying with my family. They introduced me to this gentleman who was a caricature artist, a black caricature. I can't remember his name right now, but he worked for the Detroit News, and they actually knew him. So I actually went to his house. He showed me some things, and so I really fell in love with caricature, right? And then cartooning really is abstraction. It's actually this idea because you take away things. It's a difference between like, comic book illustrator and someone who's cartooning something. And I think you kind of get at some of it, right? Comic book illustrator is trained to tell a story in a particular way, according to a particular style. Cartoonists have a little bit more authorship as far as like how they are trying to express a particular idea, And for me, like when I went to graduate school, I started to pull in all these different influences, So I'm really influenced a lot by like Dennis Cowan's work, but also just as much by Franz Masrio's work, who was a printmaker, or Lind Ward. I was looking at a lot of the German expressionists, that kind of stuff. So another thing is I fell in love with like Dave McKean's work. I think he's one of the greatest. He's just a great cartoonist. He did the Sandman stuff. So my hand is actually like, it tells on me, so to speak. I like fluid lines. I like stuff like, Bill Sienkiewicz's work. I'm a really, really big, Ted McKeever is a huge influence on me too. So it's like that kind of line work is really like part of how I tell stories, I don't know. Sometimes I think like, because comics are so inherently surreal that you need to actually have like a weirdness to. I like weird comics because comics is a weird medium, Right. So yeah, that's kind of like my answer to that. So I definitely would fit a style to what, like for instance, if you see the stuff I did for the Met, I just did the first like illustrated, it was a comic that I did for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And it's a more realistic style. I use a lot of like, photographic references, but mostly I'm coming out of my head. Like for Kindred, like I didn't use any references pretty much. I just kind of just drew, And there's something about the dynamism when you just sit down and just make something like that, Yeah, you're trying to catch up,
It's odd. Okay. All the artists that you mentioned that were influences on you are those that are known for doing not illustrations as much as images. If you get my meaning in terms of the distinction between the two, like Bill Sienkiewicz, like he's known for doing these images that are almost like dreamlike,
Yes. Yeah.
And most of the artists that you named are those that do that type of art style that I would describe it in that manner. So that's interesting.
Yeah, no. Because I think of comics as, like I said, they're very surreal. They work very symbolically. They mess around with time and image in different ways. The other thing that's really interesting about the medium of comics is that anything on the storytelling on a page can actually tell a story, right? That includes the gutter. That includes like the typefaces that you use for the fonts. For the fonts and typefaces you use for the captions and stuff like that. Color, all these different things. These are actually like the vernacular or like the vocabulary of comics, right? And everything is a picture, which means that it could be deployed to tell a story. Like for instance, if you've seen After the Rain, one of the things me and David Brame did is that we decided to actually fill up the gutter with ephemera, because we wanted the audience to feel like claustrophobic, So that kind of thing is like you can actually use every aspect of a comic to tell a story, right? If you want to do a dream sequence, you make the panels like lighter, or you make them like bubbles or something like that, because we're speaking in a very like surreal, abstract language. And I'm really into that aspect of it. And don't get me wrong, I love realistic art as well, but the true power of comics to me is like the strange, and I'm attracted to those type of characters too, like, like Doctor Strange, one of my favorite characters. So yeah.
Okay, Tamiko, would you be so kind as to help us out?
Sure. So, Professor Jennings,
Yes.
What I want to ask first was, what is your favorite works to date? I know that's kind of like asking which child is your favorite child.
Oh man,
No,
that's a good question. I don't know. I'm like, let me think on that, because it's like each one is is so different. You know, because I collaborate a lot too. You know, that's the thing. Like I've worked on a lot of collaborations. Probably Blue Hand Mojo because it's my, you know, it's because it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Like I was interested in the Great Migration, you know, when I was working on it. So I was particularly interested in the Great Migration from Mississippi to Chicago, right? So I basically created a character to explore that, you know, and that's what he is. He's a mystic and he's like a hoodoo man, and you know, is a traumatized character, but I really do like how that turned out, you know. And it's something that I actually wrote and illustrated myself, you know. Now I want to say, you know, because it's not out yet, but I have this character called the Mighty Struggle that I think that you guys are gonna love when it comes out. Yeah, it's a intergenerational superhero, very very pro-black superhero that passes his power along, you know, through time and space. So we're getting ready to put that out soon, but it's probably a toss-up but you don't have the frame of reference for the Mighty Struggle, but that's coming pretty soon. But yeah, so Blue Hand Mojo probably is my favorite thing, you know.
Awesome. So, what would be on your pull list? What are you reading?
You know, what am I reading? Oh, shoot, that's a good question. So many things. Oh my goodness. You know, right now I'm checking out, was it New Masters? Isn't it called New Masters by the
New Masters? Yeah. The Showboat.
Pretty good.
The Showboat Brothers. Yeah, I've been trying to work with them for a while. I just had a meeting with them like not too long ago, actually. Let me see. I really love Philadelphia. I like a lot of horror stuff. I love superheroes too. I'm picking up. I haven't read it yet, but I'm picking up Jeffrey Thorne's Green Lantern. You know, I'm gonna binge read it real hard, like pretty soon. You know, because I've heard such good things about it. But I buy it on a monthly.
That reads better as a binge too.
What do you say? Oh yeah. So that's the thing too. Is like I really like sitting with a story all at once. You know.
Yeah.
Philadelphia, of course, and you know anything Rodney Barnes is writing, I'm probably going to read pretty much. What else have I been checking out?
Have you checked out Needle Hawes yet?
Yeah. I'm really, yes, definitely. That's really good actually. And when I read it, I was like, man, this reminds me of The Exorcist 3. You know, and then when he was in my class, he said, "Oh yeah, this is inspired by Legion." I was like, "Yep, definitely." It's a great, definitely. What else am I reading? Because I'll pick up stuff intermittently too. Like I was picking up Dark Blood. I haven't had a chance to read a lot of this, by the way, because I've been busy. But you know, I'll support. You know, what I'm saying, so there's something black is coming out. Dark Blood, I bought. You know,
if you liked New Masters, I'd also recommend, if you haven't already, Land of the Living Gods.
Oh, really? Okay, I was curious about that. Yeah, I haven't checked it out. It was in my queue. I mean, it was in the corner of my eye, but now I check it out. Another one I thought was really cool. Oh man, what's the name of it? It's set like in a future Africa, and there's this dude trying to protect this rhinoceros.
Oh, Nobody's Child.
Nobody's Child. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so stuff like that. So I love like weird, awesome things like that. The Blade Runner Origins.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So you know, so when I saw, this is the thing, just when I saw y'all's page, you're reading pretty much exactly what I'm reading. I'm like, you know, this is the most beautifully obscure black thing. I was like, yeah, because essentially these days we don't have to read like about white characters and we don't want to. Now, mind you, like I said, I love Daredevil, so I was picking up the Chip Zdarsky Daredevil. You know, I have not picked up the Elektra story yet, but I do plan to. You know. I was definitely reading the bejesus out of Immortal Hulk. That was a comic book I was reading on a monthly basis. Could not wait to get the next issue. I loved the Immortal Hulk. I also loved N.K. Jemison's book, Far Sector.
Oh, that's
I thought Far Sector was just incredible. I was like, oh, and Naomi, you know, because I'm good friends with David Walker, and so I was like, yeah, I want to support. But yeah, so that's just a. I buy a lot of books, so I'm like you guys. So I'm like, some things I'm just kind of just sitting. I don't buy physical books, by the way. I know I know you're like, what? My wife won't allow it anymore. Like you can't see it, but my whole office ain't done. I got so many books up in this joint because so it's not. Yeah. So I'm on Comicsology, you know, doing digital books and stuff. So yeah, I can't. she get mad when people send me free books. She's like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Baby, I'm a publisher. I publish books, man." You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Anyway, people will send me free things. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tamika.
That's fine. How did you find us? Because me being new, I'm the newest Black Comic Lord. So of course, when I'm going through the pages, and then I saw your name, and I'm sitting there thinking, wait, is that the John Jennings?
Oh,
Right?
that's
So
very kind. First of all, I mean,
So-
we got this to record, so I can actually send this to my wife and be like, "See, people like me."
yeah, definitely.
So,
So how did you find us?
how did I find Black Comic Law? That's a good question. Brother Fuller.
Larry Fuller.
Larry Fuller.
Yes.
Yeah. Because we talked with good friends, and you know, we have been working on that show together, like the one that is opening this weekend. And yeah, we were just talking, and he was like, "Man, you need to check out these brothers, Black Comic Lords. You know, they're really just amazing." And you know, he talked y'all up. So I went and found it, and I was like, "This is incredible," you know. And then I told you see that Angelique Roche is on there now too, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's because she was like, you know, there's always this kind of like stigma about like, you know, who's reading comics, you know, men of a certain age and stuff. I'm glad you're on here, Tamiko. And I told us like, no, it's not like that. One of the things I love about the page is like it's love. You know, it's not, no one's competing with each other. It's all about helping each other, and it's all like, you know, hey, we're trying to secure these particular artifacts, because you're essentially like, you know, what John Confer would call data thieves, right? Where you're trying to collect the perfect collection for a future generation. That's part of it too, right? You want to have it, but also the archiving of things is for the future, you know. So
We like to use the term curation.
Curation is great. Yeah, I think that's perfect. Yeah, curation is great.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah. Because you think like the way that you post things and the way you think about it is curatorial in nature, and I just hadn't seen anything like that before. It's very inspirational, actually. So that's how I found it's called Larry Fuller. Yep.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to switch gears, and I want to talk about a couple of amazing books. I'm gonna flex a little bit.
Oh yeah, see, you got the yes, sir.
Is that Black Comics 1?
Yes, it is.
He's holding out on
And
me.
the other one is Black Comics Returns.
And I just got Black Comics Returns.
Yeah, I tried to get Black Comics 1, Professor Jennings, but yeah.
Good luck with
The price on that has gone up significantly.
Yeah, it had nothing to do with it. You know,
it's kind of like, do I want my kid to go to college, or do I want to get?
Listen. These books are amazing books. I think, in my humble opinion, these should be in every Black collector's library, as well as white collectors should have this, because what you've done in these books with your partner is giving us access to those artists, those creators who we would never know about.
Right.
Thank God for the internet, because and this came out kind of prior, I would say, to, in a sense. A lot of these artists in here I was not familiar.
Right. A lot of them are in the space now too.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. A lot of them are in the space.
But
yeah,
I gotta say thank you for these, for real.
No, thank you for that. Me and Damien were really adamant about it. So yeah, you're very welcome. Seriously.
As I read through that comics book, I saw a lot of the artists that are in there are now in our space. I don't know if you're responsible for that, but I thought that was pretty cool.
I don't know if I'm responsible for anything except for but no, it's go ahead, Rich. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask a question. Given the significance of this work, of this body of work, because I do believe it's very significant, how has it, in your opinion, impacted the collective consciousness? Because again, spaces like ours try our dear best to communicate with creators and artists, because we're fans, first and foremost. So, I know that there have been other books, but nothing like this,
right.
Which is why you can't get this book now you can't go to eBay and just find this. So how do you think the impact of this body of work has been?
Of course it's difficult to say, right? But one of the things that me and Damien thought about, because the Black Comics book, it spun out of a larger exhibition that we were doing. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's called Out of Sequence. And that particular catalog, I think you can still get your hands on. So the other thing that some people don't realize, Damien Duffy is a white creator, right? Damien is like, what? Yeah, Damien is 10 years younger than me, and he's white, and he's of Irish, descent. But he is politically and aesthetically, we are the same. You know what I'm saying? So when we met each other in Champaign, we started talking, and we realized, like, you know what, we should work together because we have very similar ideas about comics. And so we've been working together like almost 17 years now, and on not only curatorial work, but also on, making comics. I mean, we adopted Octavia Butler's work together. I think that at the time when those books were being created, you were starting to see a sea change, a zeitgeist, if you will, around Black speculative culture. And I think one thing that we try to do is show the Black independent comics movement, or as Curator Only calls it, the Black Age of Comics movement, as a unified front. That these people are out here. I mean, we have our own award ceremonies, our own rivalries, our own ways of moving through the world, like our own superstars. It was a very self-contained culture that people just didn't even realize was there. And so one thing I've always been trying to do is like reconnect comics back to Afrofuturism, in the original term, because of course we've been doing speculative fiction for like generations, right? But comics have always been kind of like excluded in some ways. But one thing that Mark Derry did when he wrote his piece on Afrofuturism, he posits Milestone Media and Kyle Baker's work as part of the movement, and so I think what I've been trying to do is actually make that even clearer, that these particular, people like Pedro Bell and Curator Only, Overton Lloyd, Mashindo Kumba, Dawood Anyabwile, Tim Fielder, these are people that were there at the beginning, and of course you have, people like Ania and Milestone, of course, Roosevelt Pitt, these are folk who were out there doing it. The LA Phoenix was out here flying, what I'm saying? So there's been a significant amount of creators who are out there doing it. And I think what we've been trying to do is say, we've always been here, and so I think it's difficult to gauge, but I do think that what it's given us is like a roadmap, to show future generations that this is possible, because these are all independent publishers, and not just artists. All these people are business people. They're making comics, and making a living for these comics, So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Kindred earlier.
Yes.
And this is my copy of Kindred. First of all, let me say I love what you did with Octavia Butler's Kindred.
Thank you.
This was amazing. But here's the interesting thing. This was a hard read for me. What I mean by that is that it was really startling. Your art on this, kind of haunted me, so to speak. I could only read like a couple of pages of it, and then I'd have to put it away. Yeah, I pick it back up, and that kind of thing. It wasn't something I could fly through. So I was just curious. You also, if I'm not mistaken, received the Hugo Award for The Parable of the Soul, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Huge honor. Huge honor.
Absolutely. So my question is, have you always been interested in Octavia Butler, or was this something that kind of came to you as an idea for a project? Well, because her work is amazing.
Her work's incredible. I'm just curious. So it's funny because I came to her work late. I went to Jackson State. I learned about all of the Black writers from the Harlem Renaissance, and your Langston Hugheses and your County Cullens and your Sonia Sanchez's. No one was talking about Samuel R. Delaney or Octavia Butler or Stephen Barnes or Tananarive Due. I didn't even know who these people were until much later, right? So I want to say that the first time I came across Octavia's work was only a little bit before she passed away. I think maybe like early 2000s, right? And of course, the first thing I read was Wild Seed, which is still my favorite book of hers. Actually, it's just extraordinary work. I just couldn't stop reading it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is written by a Black woman, and this is about Black people." Oh my God, And I think Kindred was the second thing, right? And from then on, I was hooked. And so, yeah, I mean, I think by the time we got a chance to do the Kindred book, I was a massive fan. Yes. And so is Damien.
Okay.
Like Damien actually came across her work when he was in undergrad because his teacher, because he was taking a creative writing class, and he was interested in writing from a first person's perspective, and his teacher was like, "Oh, well, you need to read Kindred," right? And the thing that made him fall in love with Kindred was the fact that you don't realize that Dana Franklin is Black until the second chapter. And it's when Rufus uses the N-word, and you're like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, wait a minute," because there was nothing that indicated that she was Black on the cover. The book that he had, it didn't have her picture of Dana, so that's something that we couldn't do in the comic book, of course, because when you see her unpacking the box, well, obviously she's a Black woman, right? But in the prose, oh my God, it was just genius. And so from then on, we realized it was a horror story. So I'm sorry that we traumatized you, Rich, but we wanted to think.
I mean, it was good trauma, I would say. Here's the thing. I mean, here's the thing about it. I saw you in an interview and you talking about how there are a lot of, in terms of Afrofuturism, there tends to be, sometimes tropes or leadings to time travel, and we get kind of that in a bit of that in Kindred. So, what do you think it is about time travel that fascinates us as African people? Because we really seem to identify with it, even if we know zero about the science or whatever,
quantum physics or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's because we've been wronged. You know what I'm saying? I think that that generational trauma of the Ma'afa, of the slave trade, affected us as a people, and we want to fix it. We know it was wrong. It was an aberration, and so I think a lot of times in the science fiction that we're writing, it may sometimes have the added burden of trying to undisrupt the past to move forward properly. That's what this means. That's why I'm so into the idea of Sankofa, right? Because you're looking backwards and you're learning from the past, but you're also simultaneously focused on the future, and one feeds the other, And I think that's why I think so many people are like, you know what, we need to figure out how to fix this, because you can see the results of it. Even when people are blaming you, a victim blaming, oh, Black people are shiftless and ignorant and violent, and no, this is what happens when an entire people is when they turn into things for a few hundred years, and then you unthingify, and there's no place for you. So that's the thing, is like you use stories to create a new space, through normal.
Now let me ask you about that, because in our space at times we wrestle. I'm not gonna say we all in our fight, but we do wrestle with this thought that Black people can't disassociate or detach themselves from the legacy of slavery or oppression. And I bring that up because it's like some people would say that, can't we just tell a story,
right?
Without that. But it's kind of hard to do that when you like you said, for hundreds of years this has been our reality. So what would you say to those who think that we should try to do that versus embracing our trauma, embracing our pain and the legacy of slavery?
Well, I think you can still do both, but it's like if you're a storyteller and you get to a certain point where people are actually listening to you, it's very hard to just make something that's fun and frivolous. You know what I'm saying? You know, as a Black artist, you know, and this is something that, of course, is about the nature of Black art. You know, and this is something that Du Bois was struggling with, right? He has this piece called I think it's called the Criteria of Negro Art, I think is the name of it. And it's talking, I think it's or something that I might be butchering the title of it, but he's writing about, it's kind of like a treatise about the nature of Black art should be to deal with these issues. You know, that's what he believed, right? And then of course, Emory Douglas has I think 11-point, you know, plan. You know, he was the minister of propaganda for the Panthers, for the Black Panthers, who has a similar ideology. I don't know. I think for me, it's like just because I'm of a, you know, from where I came from, and I'm of a particular generation, that it's difficult for me not to tell those type, or to at least try to address some of those problems, because they've been erased. So if our history wasn't totally under attack, like it is now, you know, then we wouldn't have to. I could actually go and just make a story about a dragon fighting with a minotaur, you know, in a tutu in outer space, whatever, you know, and just have it be that, you know. But yeah, we don't have the affordances of doing that, you know, because the world won't let us, because, you know, and this is something I talked to my friend Stacy about a lot too, because we've like, man, is Black art held hostage by trauma, you know, or just dealing with these issues, you know? Is it held like, can we not talk about these things? And I think you can, but you want to. I feel guilty if I can say something and do something with the art and I'm not doing it. I think that's the thing too. I think it depends on the person. You know, for me, it's like, well, I'm just going to make blickety black art until I die, probably, unless a sea change happens between now and whenever, right? Yeah, I just can't do it. It's funny because, you know, I was watching this movie, which I really enjoyed. Actually, it was the Adam Project, right? Which just came out. So it's a time travel story, and this is fun. It reminded me of 1980s movies. Was Ryan Reynolds and Jennifer Garner, and it was a lot of fun with Mark Ruffalo. And the first thing I noticed, of course, was the lack of diversity in the cast. You know, and I haven't said anything but people really like this movie. You know, and I was like, you know, and I've noticed it immediately because I'm used to looking at those things, right? But it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me as much because now what's happened is that we actually have, you know, stuff like Needle in a Time Stack, or, you know, Synchronic. We have a Black man who's the lead character, or stuff, you know, things of that nature. So I think that with the things are changing. I'm thinking that if we can keep putting this work out here, I want to normalize, you know, doing something that's just joyous, you know. But we haven't gotten that point. We just haven't gotten to the point yet. And I think what's going to happen too is that people are going to start they've already started pushing back against our narratives, calling it racist, or, you know, it's woke, or it's, you know, you just an SJW and this kind of thing. And really what that is dog whistles for anything that's progressive against the status quo, you know. Or as Tertiary only calls it the Eurostream, I think. A few other people call it the Eurostream, right? Anyway, but yeah, I go back and forth about it. Believe me, it's a discussion. But for me, I can't help but make things that don't relate to the issues that I'm dealing with, because, you know, at 51, we had the nerve to have a baby, you know, so we have a 2.5-year-old, and the world that I want him to inherit. I want him to not worry about it, you know, which means that, you know, we're going to have to worry about it until it gets fixed, you know. Absolutely. But the thing is, though, is that too many people benefit from division, you know. My whole thing is that you can redesign, you know, clothing every season. We can always have different. Every time I look around, there's an upgrade to my computer software. We can't fix the problems that our world is dealing with. It's because people are greedy, and people, you know, certain people profit from division. You know, I don't want to have to be making these things, but, you know, if I have to make you uncomfortable so my son can live his life, then I'm willing to be that. You know, I'm willing to do that. So yeah,
so be it. Let me ask you. I checked out your essay or your piece that you did on God Loves, Man Kills.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, through the lens of now. that has always been an amazing story to me. When it comes to the mutants or whatever, I tend to think about Black people.
Yes.
When I see art that reflects it doesn't matter what it really is. If I see someone oppressed, I automatically think about us.
Yes.
Just because of our history. And so when you think about what they did with that particular story, could you briefly tell us how this story has impacted you and how you see our relationship with the X-Men in regards to them being different, them being oppressed and attacked for who they are, not for what necessarily what they did,
Right.
and some of the shock value, whether it was Kitty Pryde using the N-word or what. Just give us your thoughts on that particular aspect, sir.
No, it's funny that you mentioned that, because to me, when Chris Claremont takes over the X-Men, he turns it into an amazingly dense, beautifully constructed, like, character study. All the different characters. People love the characters, and they want to see them interact with each other. He's the one that just kind of sculpts these characters. So at the beginning of God Loves, Man Kills, there is these two Black mutants actually who are being pursued, by Stryker's murdering forces, right? And they're lynched essentially, right? They're lynched right there on the playground, showing that every mutant that you're not safe. But of course, he's also actively using the metaphor of the mutant for race in this particular story. And for real, he's hammering it home, so to speak. And he really does a great job of taking a character like Stryker and also vilifying religion. That's the other thing too. It's like there's so many different things, because Stryker is a preacher, right? In the comic book, he's a military dude as well, but he also is kind of a minister. He has the ear of the people, so to speak, right? And the way that he weaponizes Xavier against his own people, reminds me of how some people who are Black are weaponized against their own people and used as turncoats or like moles or what have you. We saw something like that, with the Black Messiah film, So I see all of those things. And so once, and I haven't read it in a while. So when they approached me to write it, so I had already done a piece for them for the Marvel's Voices piece. And this is the second thing I wrote for them. And, I know it was important because they're reprinting this. This essay was going to be front and center, and I had to think about what these different things meant. Now, actually, the finished version, I had to take out a few things because I think I went a little bit too hard in the paint, because we are talking about Disney and Marvel, but they left a lot of what I said in the piece, but I think the thing that really, really drove home the feel, like what he wanted to deal with, was that initial the opening part, I don't even know if you could even make a book like that now. You know what I'm saying? Not really. I mean, I guess there are people, as far as like in the mainstream, I'm like, what other book really, really has delved into those issues like that? From Marvel, dealing with those mainstream characters, we would get so much pushback from, our white counterparts who are made uncomfortable by those issues. But those are some of the things. I mean, I don't necessarily fall into the category of people that think of like Magneto as Malcolm X or Dr. King as Professor Xavier. Right. I think that's pushing a little bit too far. But they obviously are. Well, if you look at, I read a little bit of this new run with Jonathan Hickman, where they're essentially in line with each other. It's just very powerful. So but these are people who are coming at this issue from different points of view. The other thing too is that it really drives home Scott Summers' relationship to Xavier, as well, which I found really interesting. And one of the most poignant things that was said was by Storm at the end of the story.
Right.
Black, the only Black mutant, besides Nightcrawler, because Nightcrawler's Black.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. You know what I'm saying? Because he's the only person that at the time really couldn't. You know, he's an interesting character. He would pass. He had a machine that allowed him to pass, but essentially he has a mutation that doesn't allow him to hide. You know, like black people can't hide. We can't hide our phenotype in our skin. You know, and Storm speaks to this. You know, very very subtly at the end of the adventure. So yeah, it's definitely like one of the best standalone X-Men stories ever written, and it has its issues, of course. I mean, like that crazy like war, the gang that I think Kitty Pryde comes across. It looked like somebody the Warriors. You know what I'm saying? I was like, so yeah, I'm like, oh, but they're it's of its time, but it's still very poignant. You know,
Right.
Yeah. Hope that answers your question. I hope it
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna pass the baton to my man Paul, and we want to kind of see what's ahead. What's up ahead? Go ahead, Paul.
Well, first of all, Professor Jennings, I wanted to say thank you for being a griot of our culture.
Oh,
you know, we don't have enough of those. You're certainly very profound with it. So just as a general thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
As I was reviewing some of the things that you talked about, well, before I get that, there's something you mentioned and you were talking now and before we actually got on was the work that you have behind you.
Yes.
That's a work that you did. I think you said it was for a cover of a book.
Yes, for two books by Ronaldo Anderson. One is the Black Speculative Arts Movement. I forgot the name of the other one actually. Oh, it's the Astral Blackness book. So it's two collections of scholarly work on Afrofuturism and Black speculative culture, co-edited by Ronaldo Anderson and Clint Fluker, and was it Charles? Not Charles Johnson. I'm forgetting Charles's name. Oh, I'm a terrible person. Anyway, so yeah, but it's a collection of essays about Afrofuturism from various lenses, but it's scholarly work, and so the two covers kind of come together. Yeah. So
is there some place that anyone can get a copy of a print of that? Because that's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, you talking about of this particular image itself?
Yes.
I think I might have it up on Society 6. I need to double check, but I will. Let's talk about it. You know what I'm saying? So, I need to do better about selling my work. That's the other thing too. Is I really a lot of times I'm making work because it relaxes me, or I'm making it for a job. So a lot of stuff I'm getting picked up for, book covers and things of that nature. But the work itself, I should probably do better about selling, in a store somewhere. So yeah. So let's figure that out. So
certainly. One of the things that I saw in my research of some of the things you've done, you use this term, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Symbolic annihilation.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what that means?
Symbolic annihilation is it comes out of sociology. Basically, it's a sociological term. And it was created once in the late 70s, and I forget the guy that actually posited it. But the first time I heard it was from this wonderful woman named Zetta Elliott, Dr. Zetta Elliott, and she's a children's book writer primarily, and does a lot of work around children's fiction and how it affects the Black children's psyche, essentially. So the basis is that when you don't show images of someone, it's a symbolic death. It's an erasure, you know what I'm saying? So by not showing Black children, Black women, Black men, Black families, Black experiences, you're negating them, and showing that they're not important, that they didn't actually add anything to the world, and you think it's a small thing, but actually it's kind of, there's studies that have shown that it degrades, your self-esteem, to walk around and see, nothing that looks like you, that actually, or proves that you've actually helped build a society, is a very powerful, negative weapon against you. So of course, if you erase those images, then of course, it's one of the first things that you do when you conquer someone, right? You take over their culture, you erase everything they've done. You burn their books, you destroy their history, you twist their history, You destroy everything that looks like them, and then you tell them that they are nothing, and then they become nothing, right? And so that's the gist of symbolic annihilation.
It's a very poignant and salient point. I think about that term when I heard you describe it, and I think about just the general idea that representation matters and why it does.
Yes.
I think about the fact that a lot of us are close in age, and in our generation, growing up in the 70s, we didn't have, particularly when we're looking at comic books, there weren't a lot of images of us at the forefront.
That's correct.
And that's one of the reasons this space exists with Comic Lords, is to highlight those images, and show that we did exist even back then, even if we weren't popularized.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully promote that those images will become much more prevalent in today's comics. I was gonna go into another deep dive on something else, but I think that would take us. That'd probably be another hour-long conversation. I don't want to.
No, we can't.
I'm a big fan of Afrofuturism myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm big into sci-fi in general, but as a kid, I grew up with things like in science fiction, like Star Trek and Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah,
was the big one for me as well. What I've always found interesting about science fiction and having Blacks in science fiction was the idea that in many of those works of science fiction, race didn't matter, right, in a sense, right? Because you look to the future where race isn't an issue anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You could see someone who acts heroically, who acts nobly, who acts honorably, and they look like you. And that in and of itself speaks volumes. So with Afrofuturism, that's something that's always fascinated me. My favorite superhero is Black Panther. If you've been in the space for 5 minutes, you'd know that.
Right. Exactly.
And so that's been a thing. I'm going off on a tangent again. I really can't go into the subject. let me ask you about this. One of the things that you guys were working on was Black Kirby.
Yes.
I saw that work, and I know you've got something with Black Kirby and the Ebon Traveling Museum.
Right.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Black Kirby is me and Stacey Robinson. So it came out of a conversation 10 years ago around the Avengers film, and Stacey and I were talking on the phone one day, and it was around the same time that Avengers had just made $1 billion worldwide. And at this point, Jack Kirby's name was not on any of the franchises, even though he co-created like all this stuff. And his family was suing Marvel and Disney for some type of remuneration, despite the fact that, they were in their rights to not give them any money because it was work for hire, right? And laughingly, one of us said, "Man, they treat that man like he Black." And somebody said, "Oh, we might as well just call him Black Kirby." Right? And they were like, "Wait a minute, that's an interesting idea." So we created an alternative reality where Jack Kirby was a Black man, and instead of being influenced by Judeo-Christian mythology and belief structures, he's influenced by Yoruban, mythology and belief structures. Like the mighty Thor becomes the mighty Shango, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. We make more explicit the connections between, like, the Black Panther and the Black Panther Party. Like we actually have an image of a Black Power fist. When the Black Power fist picks, with the with T'Challa's fist, and it's called "Make Me Want a T'Challa," stuff like that. So it's like, we were doing these satires of Black popular culture, along with like, but through a Black Kirby, through like a Jack Kirby lens, but also kind of critiquing Kirby too, because his run on Black Panther, it's fun, but it definitely like moves away from like some of the politic, of the character that we liked. He just wanted to make a space adventure, right? And there's a frog involved. This is just a strange thing. Even though
we don't often talk about that storyline.
Yeah, it's just really. I'm like, what? We're not in the jungle anymore. Kinda. We're in space. Which is when I look at something like the Intergalactic Empire Wakanda, I was like, oh, this is like taking both things and putting it in one. It's like one big thing.
And that's actually probably the most Afrofuturistic work that Marvel has ever had. And people don't realize
hands down. I'm like, it's got time travel, it's got like hands down.
Years from now, I think Coates is going to get credit for that.
Oh no, I loved his run. I loved his run. I like that a lot, actually. And people can fight me later about it, but I was like, this is really cool. I've read it several times, and I was like, this is actually really good. What is wrong? Anyway, so Black Kirby basically has become an entity. It's like a shared avatar that me and Stacey have created to talk about these issues around our love for hip hop, political satire, comics, Afrofuturism. And it's a series of like images that we've made. And now we've become art directors and we've actually made books together. So now we're coming up on our 10th anniversary. So that's part of the show at the Culver Center. The other thing we've been doing is doing these like artist projects around Black masculinity. So we did a show around, you guys know we did a show around Luke Cage, right? It was called Uncaged, Hero for Hire. And so what it is like, it's almost like it's a class masquerading as an art show. so we do like we create these images, these texts, so to speak. We have a bibliography of work that's installed in the show, and then we actually have prompts. So if you're a teacher and you walk into this space, or anybody who wants to learn anything, and we have these prompts that essentially are like class lessons that are connected to Luke Cage as a representation of like Black masculinity in the Marvel universe, And it's called Uncaged. The second one was Candyman. It was called Reflection Eternal. This is before they even announced the new Candyman movie, and it was really awesome. So this third one, though, we wanted to do something with an independent Black character, and we decided that we should focus on Eben, because Eben was Afrofuturist before there was Afrofuturism, right? So the whole story, I was like, man, this is some Black sci-fi wildness right here, So and so that's how it came to be. So the Culver Center is part of the University of California at Riverside. It's like a community space and it's connected to the Photography Museum downtown Riverside. So the show opens like this weekend. It goes to June 19th. We're going to have a closing reception for it. Probably a little tiny con, and some speakers and stuff like that. But so it looks fantastic, actually,
Will that con be streamed for those of us who can't make it out there?
That's a good question. I'm hoping so. I'll talk to Nikolai, who's our digital guy. So I'll let him know that people might want to check out some of the things that we do. And we're getting ready to do an artist talk like in 2 days with Larry, actually, with Mr. Fuller. So
I would, on behalf of the Black Comic Lords, I don't think I speak out of turn when I say this. Please feel free to post those.
For sure. I mean, I've been posting when I can. I like to bombard people's pages, just like, for instance, I mean, I've been posting the stuff we've been doing with Megascope, for instance. I mean, these are, it's a historic imprint. I mean, we launched in the middle of a global pandemic. Please don't do that. but we're making books by and about people of color, that are full blown graphic novels, which is very different even than what Milestone did. This is what so this is it's a historic time for us, and it's been an interesting journey. But that's what Black Kirby does, and that's who we are. And we've inspired a bunch of other artists, hopefully, to do what we've been doing. And we work with a lot of younger artists, and but we have a lot of fun, and we love the medium, and we love to to kind of shake things up. James Baldwin said artists are here to disturb the peace, so we're hoping that people are disturbed in the right way. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
You mentioned a name earlier, and we're talking about your upcoming works, Angelique Roche. Can you tell us who she is and what's going on with that?
Angelique Roche she's a Jackie of all trades for sure. She started out. She has a background in law, and is a performance.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. She's an attorney. Yeah, her background's in she's worked in politics actually in her previous life. She says she's a recovering attorney is what she says. But ended up segueing into doing hosting and podcasting and things of that nature, and ended up hosting Marvel's Voices, which is one of Marvel Comics, Marvel Entertainment's premier podcasts about comics culture. Very diverse, very leaning towards social political issues around diversity, and so now she's highly involved with the Marvel Voices series as well. And so, for instance, if they're launching a new theme park, or if they need to have an actor, interviewed, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to send her out to talk to them, that kind of thing, right? So she does this on a kind of a pseudo freelance basis. I mean, she's kind of her own boss, and I just haven't seen anybody who's created the space like she has for herself. I think it's pretty marvelous. So we are working on a book together, actually. We're co-writing a book called My Superhero is Black, and basically it's looking at the creations of, Marvel Comics, from 1950s up to current day. And it's not necessarily a history book, but it's definitely a timeline kind of looking at representations of Black characters throughout the decades. And so I think right now she's in the middle of editing the 90s right now. So, and it's funny, I can actually ask you guys this question right now. I just thought about it. We were talking about Deathlock, actually, because Deathlock is a character that actually is extremely Afrofuturist, that actually predates the term, because I want to say the Michael Collins version, Michael Collins Deathlock,
right? Right. That's volume 2.
Right, and so what I'm thinking is that, and this is something she brought up was okay. So Dwayne McDuffie is credited with the creation of Deathlock, correct?
Well, McDuffie
Michael Collins.
Michael Collins, yes.
Yeah, that version of Deathlock, right? And eventually he works with Dennis Cowan, who they later went on to found, Milestone Media, right?
Dennis actually did the art on, and Dwayne also was on volume 3.
That's right. But he picks up in the original, the miniseries starts off with Jackson Geis is drawing it the first 2 issues, and then Dennis picks up the second and the third and fourth issues is Dennis Cowan, and then he of course he works on the series, right, with Dwayne. Right. So we're thinking well, as far as a Black superhero that's created by a Black man, for Marvel, is there another character that actually had 2 Black people working on it, that was on a character that's created for Marvel by a Black person? You know what I'm saying? And I'm kind of stumped on it. I was like, is there? I can't think of another one right now. But then,
Blue Marvel was created by Kevin Greavy.
But this is later though. It's much later.
Yeah, later.
No, the first. Historically, is there someone?
Who was the first?
I don't want to turn up time. We can wrestle about it later, but I want to put that out there as something that we've been thinking about, because I was going to ask y'all on the board. So I was like, well, here we are, so it might as well. So it's
right. I'm sure Herschel could figure that out in about 10 minutes.
Right.
We'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, so that book is coming out in the fall, and we've been working on it for almost 2 years. And so it was, work for hire. I mean, essentially, Simon & Schuster and Marvel reached out to us to work on it for them, and they had the title and everything in place, and they were like, "This is what we want to do," and I was like, "Oh, sure." So,
the format of that book, is it? I mean, Angelique had worked on, as you mentioned, the Marvel Voices, which is an anthology series. I assume that this book is not going to be an anthology series. It's
no, this is an illustrated. This is closer to a guide. So it's going to have highly illustrated. It's going to be timelines. It's going to be reference. It's a reference book. Not a history book per se, because it's impossible to list all the over 200 characters that are Black that Marvel has. I think we counted maybe 250 or so characters.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. since 1950.
How many do you think you're going to get in the book?
Well, not to give away too much, but we want to have like a count, almost like a yearbook snapshot of the characters at the end of every decade. So we're not covering a lot we can't cover that many in the chapter because we only have like 250 pages. We would have to do like 5 volumes in order to cover everybody. So
that's historical. And
it's like no one's done it before, and it's really daunting. So yeah. So
I'm curious. Does Marvel have like and if you can't tell me, I mean, let us know. But does Marvel have like a database where you could like show me all the Black characters and
they
they do?
Yeah.
Wow.
For this book.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Angelique, if you're listening, but yes. So what happened was, they have their researchers. And so Angelique was like, we need to know how many characters you guys have that are Black, period. So they put their researchers on it and sent us all the characters. So yeah.
Here's $1 million question for you.
That's terrible, right? I'm sorry, I shouldn't probably tell you that, but
No, I mean that's huge.
I don't think it really matters.
It's important that they know that, but here's the question: is Sunspot on the list?
Yes.
Is he?
He's Afro Latino, man.
I mean, we know that.
Yeah, he is.
It's just that how he's often portrayed.
So that's a whole other thing. But yeah,
that's a whole other thing.
But also Dr. Reyes as well. Cecilia Reyes. Yeah. So yeah, I felt weird telling you that, but I knew what you were going to ask me. I was like, oh, he's going to ask me, but no. But the stuff that they generated, they had never even dealt with before. Yeah, and so that's what's so crazy about it. So this is one of the, and we're not used to that, right? And this is something I was talking to her about. It's like we're used to having to do this on our own as independent grassroots creators, right? Mm-hmm. You have to create something like Black Comics Lore to even archive these things, right? This is the first time a major, one of the big two have actually done something like this.
It's really crazy. There's a guy that we know in these spaces. His name is Ryan Slott. What I forget his last name. Excuse me if he watches this. What's his webpage? Rich, World of Black Superheroes.
World of Black Heroes.
Have you ever seen that website?
Yeah, I think it's great. It's wonderful.
He's the one that we interviewed him once, and he's the one that pointed out to us because I'm a big X-Men fan too. I read a lot of my collection consists of X-Men. Marvel has at the time of the interview about 100 Black mutants. You see regularly maybe half a dozen at most, but historically speaking, there are about 100 Black mutants in Marvel's history. Mm-hmm. And I'm always tweeting to Marvel, here's another Black mutant you guys can pull off the shelf and throw in a book. They're there. We can see more than just the half a dozen you always show us.
Right.
I already told you, Paul, they're all in witness protection. You can't just be calling them out like that.
I mean, the other thing too is like, I probably have said too much. But yes, these are things that are being worked on internally. I have to say that, these companies are listening. That's why you get the things that you're getting, right? That's why you get like, Black Manta. That's why you're getting these things because, the fans want these types of books, and they've proven to be lucrative, So.
I know you mentioned that you can't speak a whole lot about the book, but I hope when you get closer to the release date, which I believe is October 11th, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's right. Yeah.
That you'll come back and talk to us about it because.
Oh no, I would. Yeah, I would love to come back with Angelique, and I think I mentioned too. You definitely should have her as a guest, just because she's effervescent and wonderful, but also very knowledgeable about all this stuff. So
she's next.
Yes.
Talk to Tamiko about that.
Yes. Good.
Okay. All right, over to you, Rich.
Okay, before we get up out of here, I wanted to talk to you about, you mentioned, you actually answered one of my questions earlier, but I do want to talk about this book, man, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Blue Hand Mojo.
Oh, thank you.
And loved it. My only question.
Yes.
Are we going to get more stories of Half Dead John?
Yes, we are. I'm working on one right now, actually. Yep. Working on right now.
Great.
Yeah, it's just
great.
that, you know,
And
it's
this
difficult.
is for those who know, who may not know or whatever, this is Dr. Jennings. He wrote this and he illustrated this.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bad mamma jamma, I gotta say.
Yeah, he's not to be played with. Not to be played with.
And what I love about this, I'm gonna be honest with you. What I love about this book, the whole time I was reading it, I was thinking about this is what Dr. Voodoo should be to Marvel.
Wow.
And you know, because this is a guy who is, you know, a brother, of course, but he has a biting wit about him. And you know, I just enjoyed his you know how to turn a phrase, I'll say it like that. You gotta get this book. This is the raw book.
You're making me blush. Like for real, I mean, yeah. He definitely is not to. He's definitely not to be played with. And let me tell you this. You know that there's audiobook, right?
Really?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
Graphic Audio. Okay. So Graphic Audio did a book, audiobook, and it's acted out. It's not it's no one's reading to you. It's like a play. It's like a
okay.
So there's character, like, so they're actually actors who are playing, and it's music and everything. So it's like it's like a totally different story.
You know, I just enjoyed it. I mean, it strikes me in the vein. I don't know. Let me just ask you, what was your inspiration for this book?
The inspiration for the book, it's a mixture of, like, you know, I'm a really big fan of John Constantine. You know, I love the working class mage kind of thing. But also, I grew up in juke joints. I grew up from Mississippi. I grew up, you know, with people playing the dozens. I grew up with the blues. I grew up with, you know, in the shadow of Emmett Till. You know, so that's the kind of thing that you get, you know, when you are surrounded by that type of culture, right? So I wanted a character that reminded me of some of the men that I knew growing up, you know, but with powers that they didn't necessarily want, but are kind of forced upon them to a certain degree. Because he basically becomes a powerful conjurer because of revenge. He's a fictitious cousin of Robert Johnson, by the way. We haven't really come across it, but his name is Frank Francis Lee Half Dead Johnson. Francis Lee Johnson, that's his name. And but he's, you know, he's the cousin of Robert Johnson, but he's not real, you know. And so he goes to the crossroads, and, you know, he makes a deal with the quote unquote devil for the power to avenge his family, who's killed in an act of racialized violence by the people that he was sharecropping for. You know, that's the story. So, you know, it starts out with that. So he's a very bitter human being. You know, he's not likable. I want to create an irascible, you know, unlikable character who still does the right thing, who still has a heart.
Yeah.
Under there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
I gotta say, no, I just gotta say when the way you opened it and then the way you closed it, I literally laughed out loud, because I mean there's a story within a story. And I don't want to spoil it for my co-host or whatever, but I'm recommending it. Sure.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me, because you know, I need to write more of my own stuff. You know what I'm saying? When I get a chance. I mean, a lot of times I'm producing things, I'm drawing for other people. But yeah, Blue Hand Mojo is like, I love them. And you know, so I'm working on a second book that's gonna have 2 stories. It's gonna still be 100 pages and like 250 page connected adventures. And David Brame is going to be my artist, the same guy that, you know, my friend that drew After the Rain. I'm going to color it, so it's going to be a full color adventure this time. Same publisher. So yeah, and I haven't decided on the title yet, but but it's going to be 2 interconnected Blue Hand Mojo stories, and they're both going to be wild. I do know that one story is going to be a werewolf story for sure. So
okay.
Yeah,
that's what's up. We're here for that for sure. Well, Mr. Jennings, let me just ask you before we get out of here. Do you have any other upcoming projects you would like to put out there, or things that we can look forward to before we close out?
Let's see. Immediately. Well, we're working on the second volume of Box of Bones, with Rosarium, which is our horror adventure anthology piece we're doing. I would just try and plug the new books we're putting out for Megascope. So we actually are publishing our next book for Megascope is by Stephen Barnes and the great Charles Johnson, illustrated by Brian Christopher Moss. It's called The Eightfold Path. We also have a book coming out that is a Afrofuturist version of the Count of Monte Cristo. It's called The Last Count of Monte Cristo. Written by Ayuza Jamal Everett, drawn by Tristan Roach, who's from Barbados, and it's set 400 years after the polar ice caps melt. So it's and it's off the coast of Africa, so the count is black.
So let me get it straight. You are doing an Afrofuturism version of Alexander Dumas.
Yes.
Wow.
That's one of my dreams. Love that story.
That's one of my favorite all-time stories.
Oh, and also too, Dumas is black. So it's
that's wow.
Yeah, no, that's coming soon. And I can and really the art looks wonderful and the story is great. It's Ayuza Jamal Everett, who is my co-creator for Box of Bones, is the writer. We're doing a book about Stephanie St. Clair, who was the godmother of Harlem. She was Bumpy Johnson's mentor. So we're doing a book that's coming out soon, and also The Keeper by Tananarive Due and Stephen Barnes, drawn by Marco Finnegan, which is a coming of age book set in Detroit, modern day Detroit, and it's kind of a horror story, like an urban fantasy, dark fantasy story. So those are some of the things we have on the plate. Please check out what we're doing, because we are trying to make a change around how people are seeing what we're doing in this space. And we're just starting out, so I think this Eightfold Path is going to be our sixth book. And we should be pushing out more soon. We're trying to get them out fast, but they take time, because they're long. They're hundreds of pages long. So
when you had that interview with Rodney Barnes, obviously he must have shared the secret of how he can produce so much work and not sleep.
It's collaboration, man, and constant working. That's what it is. Honestly, we're always, he's probably working on. I think I'm probably working on just as many projects, not as large, but he's working on 12 projects. I probably I'm around the same number.
Right.
We're getting ready to sign a contract with D. Steve Bissett, who co-created John Constantine, and we're doing a book with Nalo Hopkinson. I'm doing finishes on it, but it's called Night Comes Walking, and it's Zora Hurston as a supernatural detective.
Are you serious?
Wow.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't lie to you. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Bro,
Well,
you're blowing my mind right now.
Mm-hmm.
Professor Jennings, could you just please give us your social media and your website for our viewers?
Yes, my website is johnjenningsstudio.com. That's all one word, johnjenningsstudio.com. You can find me on Instagram at John Jennings Art, and on the Twitters, I'm J.I. Jennings. So.
All right. Well, Mr. Jennings, you have been generous with your time. We want to just thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for being a part of our space. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for continuing to do the work that gives us something to talk about and gives us something to ponder and think. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
With that being said, go ahead.
I said, y'all been really inspirational to me as well, so thank you for that.
Oh,
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Well, that's going to do it for us, guys. From Paul to Miko, I'm Rich. Black Comic Lords, we love you. There ain't nothing you can do about it. Until next time, we say peace.